where those who perceive truth may strive to make others see.
A big, powerful America, and shoot them for what?
On that continent, we are trying to forge a new identity for which we need each other.
I want you to imagine that you work for the FBI or the CIA rather, and you're subpoenaed to come to this particular committee and give an official report on really your work in general. And when probed during questioning, you say, look, I don't really know what's going on. I don't, in terms of wrongdoing. And one of the main committee investigators, they pull out something shaped like a gun, and this is apparently a weapon that was made and used by the CIA in terms of in shooting shellfish toxins into people to die. Now that was, I think, the actual. This may or may not have been the actual case in terms of how the setup and this person being confronted after making denials on the record. But it is pretty much, I think, really it turns out to really be the standard in a lot of cases for these guys to essentially officially deny things that a large amount of the public knows to be simply true. In terms of this Renaissance, we're covering something that is really talking about a committee and really a lot of what inspires people to go through this, to really be accepting of this idea of renovating society. And when it comes down to this distinction between a Renaissance and a revolution, one of the main distinctions is this idea of the Blackbird Renaissance. We're not advocating for the destruction of society. It's rather it's the renovation. And in terms of this endeavor, I think I'm inspired by really this idea of this story of really what's known as Frank Church and the Church Committee, and the reasons why. We'll get to that, but in terms of the actual structure of really a Renaissance period, I think officially calling for committees that have really made a name for themselves for calling out power when it doesn't benefit them. I think it does. It's important. And this idea of really, this book in particular, this is called The Last Honest Man, and this is by James Risen. And James, James Risen is I mean, I haven't looked him up too much, but this idea of really a committee for this this deep dive on the Frank Church and the committee, I think it's really important, and it's really helping to structure this element of people who want to fix what we have now. In terms of really understanding the impact here, it said that the intelligence community can be separated in what they could do before and after the Frank Church Committee. And this guy was really known as a radical within Washington, and he was he wanted to really model himself after John Kennedy in a lot of different ways, but really what's I think is important is the formation and the structuring of this idea of a committee, really being able to enact change. Regardless, I still view this idea of church having to play the game to some degree or another, but he was able to make change in his way. And in terms of the idea of a renaissance is I'm really expecting a lot of people to have less bargaining power, or really having, in terms of this idea of really getting a lot of people to necessarily have trust in any government or governmental body. And this is this book goes into a lot of different things, and first he's covering this idea of it sections off this idea of church, and the childhood first. This guy was known as a child prodigy, but he wasn't really an outdoorsy type, which was kind of in Idaho, this was really known to, this was kind of the norm. And when it comes down to, really growing up, at some point he finds out that a man that he looked up to was probably corrupt. And they know that because they found some kind of mysterious box of money under his bed after this guy died. And it was, you could kind of really see the idea of, really the disappointment that left in, terms of, well, maybe I can be that to, the something to someone, and he also, another point is he also met his wife in grade school, and this Beth was really known to be his equal in terms of intellectually, and he went on and later on in the book they describe Beth as basically almost better at church, or if not better than church at really playing this idea of politics. It's very interesting in terms of the theme. Later we'll talk about women in his life period. I think was pretty, they had a pretty instrumental role, but he had really really made a name for himself in terms of serving with the Army, in terms of writing reports and updating reports. This guy was really known or he was really gifted at communications, it looks like, and really communicating in general. While he was running for office, one thing he decided not to really like bash his opponent personally, and I thought that was pretty classy. And the idea was actually, there was a senator who committed suicide after being harassed, and I'm pretty sure Frank Church knew where things could lead, and he just really wanted to stay away from that. It seemed like. When it comes down to his opponents, though, they did sling mud, or in terms of they did make accusations about, like, basically him being funded by, big corporations and things of that nature, but also they even after an election, in Idaho, there was his opponent went door to door, in one area trying to basically double check if Church really won that area, and definitely something to the opposition was adamant and strong, most certainly, but I think it's really important. Really, this idea of we talked a little bit about his wife, but he also had an assistant, and it's really important because these guys played really strong roles in terms of really trying to. I think his assistant had something where she was trying to get. She played a pretty active role in and essentially almost having him as really in the election in terms of in the actual presidential race on the ticket. In terms of progressing, when he got into the White House, there was really this thing where he was kind of green. That was kind of the feeling, and at some point he ran into Lyndon B. Johnson, and Lyndon B. Johnson was known as really somebody that if he voted on something and people really didn't know about what was being voted on, then they would get in line behind Lyndon B. Johnson. And he was he's known as the Senate Majority Leader or something. But this idea was he voted against one bill that Lyndon wanted to pass, and essentially it seemed like when it comes down to having this guy and him, it seemed like Lyndon B was kind of we'll call him LBJ. He was really a gatekeeper in terms of actually being in the system. Definitely, he was known for things like silent treatment and stuff like that. But if you didn't vote like he wanted you to vote, then you weren't his friend, and if you weren't his friend, you didn't get what you wanted at some point, or he'd actively make sure you didn't get what you want. And it's pretty insane to think power like that is, you know, one individual could have that type of power over, you know, a lot of elected officials. But I think this is when I think about how ultimately a lot of these guys get in line. That's it, you know. But when it came down to it, Frank did get in line with LBJ. He was, I think he was really, when you think about radicals, he was known as a radical from being in, you know, from the perspective of being in the system, you know, and I think that's an important distinction. And I think when we talk about really repairing things, I don't think that's going to, like, I don't really have much faith of repairing things from within the system. I have respect for people who can do things within the system and be effective in their nonprofit and their organizing in any case. But in terms of like the structure itself, understanding that pieces of the structure itself are rotting away, I don't like. Officially, there needs to be a lot done that really, like, when it comes down to, for instance, selecting anyone on the committee to investigate, they, like, being tied to the system is essentially, you know, something that's understood and something that is essentially, like, something that goes against your, you know, this idea of you, you know, like, oh, I'm experienced politician. That's not, I don't think that's that's going to give you any kind of pull in the committee. In fact, it can actually go against you. And I think that's really for the best, because we, you know, the selection process, how things go within the system, you know, there's gatekeepers in a lot of different places, and being in the system means you got passed in some way, shape, or form. And I think that I think a lot of people need to understand that. And anyway, the LBJ, like, he gets back good with this guy, but he was tricked in terms of, you know, LBJ told him, hey, look, man, we're going to end Vietnam, you know, and Frank was vocal and an advocate against really, like, having this war. And eventually he found out that LBJ, like, was essentially lying to him about, you know, to get his support for being, like, I think LBJ went for or he, he needed support. I'm not sure if it was for his presidency or anything, but he lied to Frank and eventually got what he wanted, and Frank figured out that he was lied to. And this idea of Frank being, like, kind of against this idea of war, this was something that was really really personal to Frank. You know, his I'm not really gonna do this justice in terms of really understanding and really, like, highlighting how personal this was, but I think it was something where, like at some point his son, like, is actively opposing the war and accuses Frank of not being basically anti-war enough, and, you know, accusing Frank of essentially being in the system. And it does seem like that was, like, a very personal point that he wanted to make. And I think this idea of being tricked, this was into supporting someone who was essentially not gonna fulfill the promises is something that really, I think, that left a mark with Frank. But he did like have this belief of, or this understanding that America is, trying to put themselves in a position to be a police of the world, and he was definitely like trying to end this idea and reform. He later on in life he was a real he was known as a kind of a thorn in the side for like it was some president that came after him. I want to say it was Jimmy Carter, like in his being pro-war, he turned out to be a problem later on in his life in terms of like foreign relations, trying to reform, reform how America was abroad. And I think I don't think you make too many good friends when you're anti-war, and I think that was definitely something of note. When it came down to this, like he leads this community, he ends up leading this committee, but he really liked the spotlight, and apparently like this guy was known for liking the spotlight, and this guy Mansfield was kind of hesitant because of this idea. And but at some point, like he's like convinced, like, all right, Frank Church is the guy, and the investigation kicks off with like basically understanding like the CIA had some, like they were overthrowing a government to favor ITT specifically, and it was essentially like this corporation was able to, or was, essentially was going to have someone in power, was going to like face with the idea of the next person in power may lead to, or is probably going to lead to less power for that corporation in that particular place. And the idea was, hey man, we can, try to overthrow these people based on, the CIA and our relationship with the CIA and the American government. And in terms of this idea, I believe a report was released on the CIA's involvement in this particular in this particular place. I want to say it was Brazil. I want to say it was somewhere in South America, if not Brazil. But in terms of one thing that I noted here was like how this committee really depended on old-fashioned detective work, and the idea was they structured this committee to essentially like if you ever watch like an interrogation on YouTube, like they structured the committee making sure that somebody was able to make that guy sweat in the chair, and that was definitely like definitely something in terms of just I think one person ended up leading a lot of like the committee because of his ability, or because of his ability to engage with people and his history, but also like in terms of like old-fashioned detective work, the way they found facts, the way they interviewed, but also like the way they submitted Freedom of Information Act requests for the CIA. And it was definitely something to see that, because when it came down to it, this is the like when I think about really detective work in general, it does seem like they struck a chord, or they struck a chord in terms of with a lot of different initiatives, but they also uncovered how the CIA used this guy Robert Mayhew to contact the mob. So Robert Mayhew kind of played as an intermediary for the mob and the CIA, and it was a shit show. It was really a shit show because it was just like all of these guys were like robbed on a like they were robbed on a pretty frequent basis. It seems like it's almost like, okay, we're gonna take this money that you give us, and like I'm just picturing somebody like, oh, okay, where are the drugs now, and they just getting looked at like 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 the like the guy's looking at you like, what are you talking about? like what, like it just made me realize like, oh, the mob really was smacking around the CIA in so many different cases. But it was funny. And but apparently they really wanted to take down Castro in a lot of different attempts, and it was really cartoonish in terms of what they looked at doing. Like there was like an exploding cigarette or exploding cigar involved. There was all types of crazy things in terms of really trying to think about ways to which they can take this guy out. And this was one of the real main things in terms of understanding like a lot of this stuff was really just solidification of the mob's relationship with the CIA. But like I think it was like as rocky as it was at the start, eventually they got to an understanding with the right people, I suppose. And eventually they were like at some point there was like literally a in the beginning times there was literally a point to where they were trying to or there was a campaign to spread deep fakes about this guy and the scandal, but you couldn't see the guy's face. They were trying to say like, I don't know, probably like he was gay or something, but they couldn't see the guy's face, and they couldn't see like a lot of like, you can tell like the pictures that was taken weren't like it was cartoonish. It was really cartoonish, but they like it did seem to help the relationship. At some like when it comes down to them, it became about really knowing whether really being able to say that the president knew or not. And this was a focal point, and it ended up being a question mark. And it's like it's something to where you're going across and you're doing things. Me personally, I believe that the president knew, and I think a lot of people believe that the president may have known about like a lot of the dealings with the CIA and what the CIA was doing. But Frank Church makes it kind of a thing to say, okay, the CIA was kind of acting like a rogue elephant. And I don't think we like this idea of people on the inside need to understand, and like this idea of claiming rogue elephants acting, and that there needs to be, I think there needs to be an understanding that that's not really something that that's an excuse, and that can be used as an excuse. And I don't think that's a valid excuse or a valid thing to really say about any organization that receives any type of governmental support. But there was a quote was they mentioned how like a king would open or a king of the past was known because he openly said, "Who will rid me of this man?" And like he was later assassinated. But it was just like that. You don't need to sign a paper, but but we just need you to just give a nod. Like at some point, like it just gets, like how do you really say that you didn't know about this? I don't know, but that's kind of how the committee ended up. When it comes down to witnesses, people testified. At some point, they were scared off because people were ending up, or witnesses were ending up dead, and like the idea was, church wanted to kind of pretend or really actively like avoid this concept of people being, it being dangerous to testify. And it's almost like, I mean, to think, or to not have a whistleblowing protection system in place for these guys is pretty insane, but it does give credence to the idea of, whistleblower protection and what that can do, and what that should do. And at some point, like this idea of the CIA, eventually, I believe they assassinated Lumumba, and he was a representative in the Congo, and church, like while investigating like this Lumumba, he kind of got he got solidified in this idea of America needing to really stop pretending as if they had the world police in a lot of different cases. And it was pretty crazy. Like this one guy like literally tells somebody, "Hey, look, go shopping," and it was literally a hellscape. And it was so crazy because this guy was comfortable. He was clearly comfortable, and he tells, I want to say it was Bethine, "Hey, go shopping, like it's okay. You take a security detail with you." And this was, that this guy was very much comfortable with that idea. Definitely, like the idea of propping your feet up in a situation like that is, or being comfortable enough to prop your feet up is something. And definitely, like, I mean, the idea of solidify, or how that solidified, this idea of church's idea of us being the world or trying to be situated as the world police, it's easy to imagine. And then in a case when it comes down to the NSA, like I literally have here, they cooperated to some degree. The leader of the NSA, this guy was like so lax and giving and like like you got the feeling that he had the upper hand in so many different ways, and a lot of, like, when it comes down to it, a lot of these guys, they don't feel like they have anyone to answer to. And when it came down to the NSA, the leader of the NSA, at some point he asked, like, wait, what do you guys have? Like, he asked the investigator, like, what do you guys have, so I know, just how much to say to you. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was, it was so crazy, but that's life, I think. These guys a lot of these guys are walking around and unchecked, like, period. And it's just kind of understanding just how corrupt some of these guys are. I find it disgusting. I find it really disgusting to think that these guys really think, like, oh, I don't, this idea of a committee investigating us. I don't really have to necessarily, go along, but I will help you guys out because this is what you know. At some point, like, it became an argument where the companies who were listening to the government agencies, or whether these company names should be listed and given, in these reports. And Frank said, yeah, definitely, like, all, like, these companies need to definitely, or these companies need to be listed. And I think that it's important because we're in a lot of cases, these companies, they chose to do wrong, and regardless of whether their government was on that side or not, that didn't matter. They chose to do wrong, and that is I find that, like, that insight, that understanding, really commendable, because when it comes down to really the power in having, in really understanding the fact that I'm betraying every customer that, in these cases relies on me, that being an understanding between, understanding of, hey, you chose wrong, and despite, what this government entity might have been telling you, it was wrong. And that needs to be exposed, that you chose and how you chose. In terms of the pressures that you face, I think that's that you make your case, after this idea of your name going on this list, but people are going to know what you chose. I think that was really something in terms of a statement for a lot of companies that came thereafter and that will come after. And he goes into, or this idea of the CIA, they were actually exposed for this MK Ultra thing, and they were even sued by, like, one of the, somebody's son who was involved in terms of what they were doing. If you don't know about MK Ultra, it's it's a thing. it was a thing. And COINTELPRO was also a thing. Like, it's in terms of the shit that these, like, these lunatics come up with, they were doing, like, a lot of them. like it was crazy. J. Edgar Hoover was, like, obsessed with communism, and, like, he was, like, I think was it the one chapter was the guy who created the spy or the surveillance state, or made America into a surveillance state, and it was about J. Edgar Hoover and this idea of this guy is I mean, he was obsessed with communism, and he was like a definite racist, and this guy had tremendous power to go after like a lot of people. He was even known for like basically like this idea of like being the guy to like scare John F. Kennedy in a lot of different cases. But he put in some pretty serious work to harass MLK and other pro-black activists. And at some point, I think when they were really getting into the actual interrogation, Mike Mansfield, he was, he said, hey, look, you can address this guy first, because his family told him that the FBI was essentially spying on MLK, and he denied it. He was in denial about this idea of the FBI spying and harassing MLK, and it comes out, and he was like, I mean, it seemed like he had his legacy. It would seem like it's tied to this idea of serving a people that would allow such a thing, and it was like it seemed like this was something that was really like this guy was literally in tears about what they did, and at some point, like if you don't know, like MLK was like harassed to a very serious extent, and even this idea of him, like at some point he was harassed to try to to basically commit suicide. It was very much I mean, it's just dark work, and this guy had this guy, J. Edgar Hoover, had like a lot of power, and he was simply a very, very flawed individual and a messed up dude, it seemed like. Later on in the committee, this guy, one of their witnesses, he basically wore like a little like cutout mask or something, and he testified, and he talked about his involvement in like hate rallies where people like where activists were actually killed, and it really left a mark, because people were questioning like just how helpful this idea of, I'm pretty sure he was an informant for the FBI, but it was really something, because it was just like, this is it came down to essentially really questioning the FBI, and I think a lot of this like really needs to be questioned to this extent. But like just kind of hearing those details for sure like made people in the room like really uncomfortable, because it was just like knowing that like this guy worked for the government and saw and partook in what he took, and this is common criminal behavior, you know what I'm saying? And having that was pretty much something that you wouldn't expect from a government of any kind. Later on, they mention a different committee, the Pike Committee, the Pike Pike committee, and but this idea of it really made me think that they really didn't have they were investigating the finances, which were less sexy at the time, but they were, and also Church was kind of known as an insider, so he had like it seemed like more pull than these guys, and it was pretty interesting in terms of the dynamic there. But they were known to be more aggressive than the Church committee, but less effective in the fact of like I said, being involved in trying to figure out the financial aspects, but also being involved in the actual or not really being the insiders, quote unquote. At some point, this guy Roselli, which was known as a witness or someone who testified against the CIA, was found dead, and they never quite understood, or they never quite got to the bottom of his death, if it was related to him testifying with the Church committee or with some other dealings with the actual mob itself. But it did scare other witnesses all the same, and that it kind of fizzled out in terms of the committee itself. It doesn't seem like in terms of, I think he embarrassed a lot of people, and I think he was really embarrassed a lot of people, a lot of organizations, and by simply shining a light and exposing their secrets. But later on, fun fact, I didn't know before this book that George Bush was actually a director of the CIA, and I just thought that was crazy. In terms of upgrading in the system, knowing that this is essentially this is essentially the president's mob, and just knowing that this guy came out of the CIA is just it's kind of funny that he got to being the president after all this taking place, which is crazy to me. But toward the end of the book, we talk about how Church starts trying to run for presidency, but he doesn't get any traction, and eventually, after he's we find out that the Church wasn't really running on an exorbitant salary. He had a regular, this is a guy who had regular funds in terms of choosing, being involved and being kind of on the inside. You would think, hey man, you can make some money in multiple ways, I'm sure. So it's really nice to see that he the idea of him trying to run for presidency on such a modest amount was pretty cool. And at some point, Jimmy Carter tried to get Church as his running mate, but at some point they realized hey, we don't really mesh well, and Church signed something, and it really sticks out of hey, look, do you have any, or as a running mate, when he was applying as a running mate for this guy, or for Jimmy Carter, he was hey, do you have any kind of secrets that we need to know about that it would embarrass embarrass us in in this campaign? And he said none. And I mean, that's pretty, it's nice to think about. It's nice to think about in terms of the last honest man. it seems definitely something to look at. And after Church dies, the intelligence community was like celebrating his death basically, and it was in terms of like having a good strike against your record. Like that was it right there. Like the intelligence community hated this guy, and they made it like this was very much like something in terms of, or this was very much known for this guy, like, and I think then like I think there's a lot, like when it comes down to the committees for this particular Renaissance, I think there's a lot that needs to be done, and and I think that it does need to come down to, hey, you are incapable of investigating yourself, so this is the committee that will investigate you. And I really have hope in this idea, only because of taking what I see here and applying it to a committee outside of what we know as politics, in terms of the political atmosphere that we currently look at. I am your bookman for this report, Sleepy. If anything, I hope to see you soon, and please like and subscribe if you're on YouTube. Thank you.